breaking news, Citadel CEO Ken Griffin outbid a group of crypto investors for a copy of the U.S. Constitution, according to the Wall Street Journal. So
oh my God.
We knew somebody was trolling the crypto.
He was a villain before this, but now, remember for payment for order flow?
Exactly.
I mean, he was the central villain, basically, in that whole Robinhood fiasco for payment for order flow. And now he outbid the crypto crowd. He is going to be enemy number one.
Basically, there is no more sophisticated market participant than Ken Griffin. And on a silver platter, this group of people, unfortunately,
told him what they're going to bid.
Showed them their strategy and showed them exactly how to become the underbidder.
He priced it right. He did the price is right. He put $1 on top of their bid.
You know what Ken Griffin knows? Ken Griffin knows that now this is an object of interest that people are basically willing to pay anything for.
Bingo.
He's going to buy it now, and in 1 year, he'll sell it for twice as much. It's a valuable asset. But by the way, I want to make a point on this.
I disagree, by the way. He's a buyer. He is not a seller.
He's going to hold. Okay. But look, markets don't work with this much transparency. Markets only work when people have different information than other people that are participating in the market.
No.
If everyone knew everything that everyone else was going to do, same data, but if everyone knew what everyone else... Different opinions, but if everyone knew everyone else's opinion on what something is worth, the market doesn't work. And that's the problem that happened here. Yeah. So here's what I value an asset at. And now if you know that, you know how to play against me in the market. And I will point out...
That's what I said.
Yeah, exactly. And one thing I'll take note of that I kind of realized yesterday when I was thinking about this, which is this like transparency in markets leads to this inflationary problem. Why do you think everything that the government buys inflates? Because everyone already knows what the government is going to spend on that thing. When the government enters into a market like healthcare or education or defense, the amount that they're going to spend is published in a bill. And then Congress says, here's your authorized budget. Here's how much you're going to spend. So there is no natural market force that says a bid and an ask. What are you willing to pay? And is there a walkaway price? There is no walkaway price when the government is told to go spend some amount of money. And as a result, the price of everything inflates to that walkaway, to that price, to that budget.
Can I build on that?
And by the way, that's the, in my opinion, based on everything I've looked at, the primary reason for the increase in education costs, because the government funds all the student loans, the increase in healthcare, the increase in defense, all of it is because the government is the customer and they tell the person that's servicing them up front, they tell the market what they're willing to pay. And so the market just inflates to that amount. And it's really the reason why the way that we budget things in the government, as opposed to saying, look, this is the ROI metric or this is the IRR metric you need to be shooting for with this government spending. It's all based on a fixed dollar amount of a budget that says, here's how much you should go spend.
Well, look, it's as I said, it's actually worse than that, because then the procurement process is the furthest thing from a free market, where you essentially have these licensed people that are allowed to provide services. And so if you actually have the key critical input to making something possible, you have to get bundled in through contractors and subcontractors and general contractors who each take their 5 and 10%. And then that's when you have, like, you know,
and their hourly costs all balloon just a little bit. And suddenly the balloon cost of everything matches exactly the budget.
So the perfect example of this is the space program. There was a rant by Bernie Sanders yesterday, basically saying, how could we have allowed Jeff Bezos, Mr. Bezos and Mr. Musk to basically take over our national space program? We need to take it back. And then hold on. And then somebody thoughtfully
Give me the transcript.
Somebody thoughtfully went back and actually looked, because again, as David said, everything is transparently published. They went back and they actually counted how much money NASA spent in like the last 7 or 8 years. And the number was $360 billion.
Yeah.
And then they counted how much money SpaceX had spent. And it was, if you counted revenue, between 7 and 11 billion.
Totally.
And so you have this incredible disparity, which speaks to this.
This guy's senile.
After the space shuttle was retired, NASA didn't even have a way to get to space until SpaceX had the rockets. I mean,
and think about how many people died on the space shuttle.
Guys, what Bernie is saying, which is what's I think scary to me, is if you take the difference between 360 billion and 7, so $353 billion, and divide it by the number of people in the United States, you're basically talking about $1,000 a person Would you and I sit around a table and give Bernie Sanders $1,000 out of our own pocket?
Oh, no.
To go and basically implement a half-assed space program? No,
It's unbelievable.
I'd rather give Elon Musk 10 cents, or 1 cent, which is the equivalent alternative, or a penny.
This raises a really serious issue, which is who is the better capital allocator of resource society, private markets, or the government? And let me give you an example. So today, the House is voting out that reconciliation bill. They're spending $2.1 trillion. Just as one example that caught my eye is they've got $2.5 billion going to tree equity, whatever that is.
I'm sorry, tree equality?
Tree equity.
What is like tree equity?
I think it might mean that like some communities have more trees. I think it means that some communities have more trees than others. And they've got to rectify that. I don't know. I mean, this is like the jump the shark moment for the word equity, because I think now everything is equity. But what struck me about this $2.5 billion number, okay, is that like Craft Ventures, which I've been doing for the last 4 years, we've raised and will be deploying a total of about $2 billion over, call it 5 years, into hundreds of startups that, will pave the way for the next generation of the economy. So $2 billion versus $2.5 billion as one line item. That's just a footnote. That's an asterisk in this bill. I mean, what is the better capital allocation decision? And what people have to understand is, all this money that gets spent gets sucked out of the private economy somehow. It either, comes from taxes or gets added to the national debt. But either way, it comes out of the private economy and resources that could be allocated to the next generation of innovative companies.
All right,
and
let's play
to
the
be
clip.
squandering the money like that on all these programs that no one even knows what they do, when we're almost 30 trillion in debt, is just unbelievable.
Okay, the 1% are going to space and taking away the moon from the other 99%. Here, roll the clip.
Unbelievably, this bill would provide and authorize some $10 billion in taxpayer money to Jeff Bezos, the second wealthiest person in America, for his space race with Elon Musk, the wealthiest person in America. This is beyond laughable, and I will be introducing an amendment to strike this provision. Frankly, it is not acceptable. It's not an issue that we have discussed terribly much, but it is not acceptable that the two wealthiest people in this country, Mr. Musk and Mr. Bezos, take control of our space efforts to return to the moon, and maybe even the extraordinary accomplishment of getting to the moon. This is not something for two billionaires to be directing. This is something for the American people to be determining.
Yeah, all the people have to be able to go to the moon before two people can go to the moon. Is that the idea?
Yeah, if there was a go to the moon DAO, it would get more funding.
Good callback. Look at you with the callbacks, Friedberg. You're learning how to entertain the
audience.
audience.
Can you imagine? People would just plow money into a go to the moon DAO and give it all to Elon Musk.
It'd be so
More
good.
people would do that than would vote to support the Senate bill.
Additionally, I would like to report that Starlink does not work at my lake house, and Amazon Prime takes 3 to 4 days at my beach house on the Cape, and that these two companies are oppressing the 3% of the top 3%, which I am not part of the 1%.
And some people don't have enough trees.
And
we need trees.
In my community, there's only small trees, and we want the redwoods from San Francisco. Why do they or the hippies get the redwoods that are much taller?
Do you guys remember one of our very earliest pods? I made a statement, which is equity is this danger word that the progressive left uses to steal power.
Yes.
That we should,
I feel unsafe.
We should always want equality, but not equity, because equity is zero sum, right? You know a cap table. When you give somebody else equity, it's dilutive to everybody else. But equality is infinite. You can have unbounded equality.
Yes.
And when I hear these guys talk about this stuff, it's so scary. The second thing is I'm a little confused by what Bernie's saying, because on the one hand, he wants to cancel the American government's effective, support of these programs. On the other hand, he wants us to take back the responsibility for it. But I think he must realize that it would cost 50 times more or 100 times more.
He's not spending sensitive, in case you haven't noticed.
I also think this is like virtue signaling. Like, he was attacking Bezos about like minimum wage, and then Bezos came over the top and like doubled it and then gave people college education. That was Bernie Sanders' platform for president. It was like, give people free college and give people like a better $15 minimum wage. Bezos has done more for Bernie's platform than anybody. He should be telling people all companies should be acting like Amazon.
No. But also, actually, to your point, can I build on that?
Yes.
Amazon is now doing more to actually unwind duopolies and monopolies in markets than the government and the FTC is. You know,
absolutely.
You see this thing that Amazon is now doing in the UK with Visa, where they basically shut Visa off. And people are speculating now that it's a step in this direction of Amazon. You know, in Amazon domestically in the United States, they just did this big deal with a firm. And so they are looking at, and there's a rumor that they may switch the Amazon credit card off of Visa rails and put them on MasterCard rails. But this is another example, Jason, to your point of like, you know, Bernie and the left, progressive left, would probably rail against the duopoly practices of Visa and MasterCard. They can't get anything done. Jeff Bezos has actually done more now. Presses a button and has done more now to actually.
Here's another one to build on yours. Who's doing, Bernie Sanders cares about global warming. It's like one of his key issues. Who's donated more to global warming than Jeff Bezos? Nobody. Who's doing 100,000 electric vehicles for his delivery fleet? Jeff Bezos. Jeff Bezos took Bernie Sanders' platform that he failed to get into office on, and he made it Amazon's platform.
Here's a third example. Nick, you tweeted this out, Nick, or you can find this thing that I tweeted out, but it was a little meme, and it was basically Tobey Maguire and Kristen Dunst. Right? There's a meme, the
famous
of like
upside down kiss.
No, they're looking at each other, and basically the joke is like, you know, every time you protested at, to shut down a nuclear plant, the resulting effect 40 years later was another 100 megatons of CO2 was put into the air. And it just goes to, yet again, another example of we virtue signal nuclear reactors and nuclear power. We go and we get them all shut down. It turned out that we ingested we put out as a result an enormous amount of more CO2 than had to be put. And now who's helping to step in and solve it? Another private citizen, Bill Gates.
Look, if it weren't for these private companies, we couldn't even get astronauts to space anymore.
Impossible.
I mean, the government has actually lost the capacity to do that.
Impossible. It would have been impossible.
And who are we up against for space? I mean, China?
No, just China. Just China.
Really. It's such a dichotomy. It's such a dichotomy between, and this is like a recurring theme of the show, between what the private sector and specifically, and not like the Fortune 500, not those old stodgy companies that are in the process of being disrupted, but what the sort of entrepreneurial economy is able to accomplish versus like how stultified and calcified and incompetent the government's become.
I mean, to your point, Friedberg, I think Sam Altman led the fusion energy startup Helion, like $500 million round. I mean, by the time these nitwits, in these political office figure these things out, we're going to have fusion reactors, aren't we? Is that real science? Is that coming close? What do you think, Friedberg?
I mean, Bill Gates just did this, what is it called? TerraPower announcement this week. He's got a company that he's been funding for years, and they're building a 500 megawatt fusion plant in Wyoming, I think. Yeah.
In Wyoming, yes.
In Wyoming. And he got $2 billion from the government and $2 billion that was funded by the company and its shareholders, which I think is majority owned by Bill Gates. But it certainly feels and seems to me, I mean, look, this one, like we've said, a lot of these infrastructure deals, these big infrastructure deals for things like power and next gen manufacturing and whatnot, could benefit from the boost of, government subsidies or, government shared costs to get these things off the ground. Over time, as you get scale and reproducibility of them, the cost per unit comes way, 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 way down. And so, it seems to be the case that there are enough of these programs. I think I know of at least half a dozen nuclear power companies that are, in advanced stages of doing, first installation design right now. And so it seems like this is going to be a reality. I think it would be an incredible boom to clean energy in the United States and globally if we can get more of these built. I mean, what was the stat? China's building 150 nuclear power plants. Yeah, they've commissioned 150 nuclear power plants. I mean, it's a no-brainer that that's what we need in the 21st century. It's the best renewable source, very small footprint, very reliable, can run 24/7. Doesn't depend on some, sun or wind or what have you. So you can plug it into a grid.
And so the government literally does not need to get involved in this, aside from writing a check and chopping it up 50-50, split the pot with Bill Gates.
I think there's an important role that the government can and should play here, which is, if we want to talk about what infrastructure this country needs, I've said it on the last couple of shows, we don't need yesteryear's infrastructure. We don't need last century's infrastructure, new bridges and, toll bridges or whatever nonsense is going to get inflated as a result of this recent infrastructure bill. What we need is next gen infrastructure, and not charging stations, because the free market's already there doing that, and not internet, because the free market's already there giving everyone internet. And we see 1,000 examples of that. What we need is the stuff that the free market cannot afford to fund and stand up, like next gen nuclear power stations, like biomanufacturing, like large scale on demand 3D printing systems. These are the sorts of infrastructure programs that the United States and our workforce could benefit from government subsidies to help the private force, the private markets get stood up. And as these things get stood up and the flywheel gets going and cash starts getting generated, they can self-fund and they can grow and they can install more of these and the costs come down for the next one. The things where the government is the only customer, the only person buying, the cost will only go up on over time. Whereas the things that the private market is building, the cost will go down over time. And in some of these cases where there's a big kind of hurdle to get over the first build or the first build cycle, the government has an important role to play, I think. And so, look, it's clearly not going to happen with this current infrastructure bill. There's a few nuggets in there that might be useful and helpful. But generally speaking, you're right. Over time, we want the cost of things to come down, not go up. And so we need the private market to play a critical role in being the majority driver, of these kind of systems.
All right. Seems like a good place to end.